They said the flight was delayed. Just 2 hours, they promised. But 2 hours turned into 5. And somewhere between lukewarm coffee and the endless airport announcements, I realized time had stopped mattering. I sat there, surrounded by strangers who looked just as tired and invisible as I felt, staring at the screen that kept flashing, delayed, like a cruel little joke. I wasn't supposed to be here this long. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere this long. I was supposed to be gone. Gone from the city. Gone from the noise. Gone from everything that had started to feel like too much. The air in the terminal felt stale, heavy with perfume, stress, and stories no one wanted to tell. I pulled my coat tighter and pretended not to care. Pretended I wasn't falling apart behind my calm expression. I had booked that ticket to escape a life that had already stopped feeling like mine. A breakup, a betrayal, a string of bad choices. It all blurred together into a single ache I couldn't name. That's when I saw him. At first, he was just another traveler, leaning casually near the cafe counter, scrolling through his phone like he owned the place. But there was something about him. The way the crowd seemed to part when he moved. The quiet confidence in his posture. The faint smirk that looked too practiced to be innocent. His suit fit like it had been stitched by sin itself. The world around him dimmed a little, and for the first time that day, I forgot I was tired. Our eyes met for just a second, a mistake, maybe, but it was enough. He looked at me like he already knew what kind of pain I carried, like he recognized it, and maybe that's what scared me most. I looked away first. Of course I did. You don't stare at men who look like that, men who radiate control, danger, and the kind of confidence that feels like gravity. But he didn't look away. I could feel it. His gaze, steady and unreadable, tracing the air between us like an unspoken challenge. Another announcement. Another delay, another excuse for fate to play games with me. He was still there when I stood to stretch. Still there when I walked past the window pretending to check my phone. And when I finally sat again, I caught a glimpse of him walking toward me. Calm. Certain. Like he'd already decided something I hadn't even been offered a choice in. When he stopped beside my chair, I could feel my pulse echo in my throat. He didn't smile this time. Didn't ask if the seat was taken. He just said, in a voice that sounded like smoke and certainty, "Commercial flights aren't worth the wait. You should come with me instead." And that was how the delay began to end. I should have laughed. I should have said no, or at least pretended I was waiting for someone. That's what normal people do when strangers invite them onto private jets in the middle of an airport delay. But normal had left my life a long time ago. He stood there, calm and steady, watching me with eyes that seemed to study every heartbeat I tried to hide. There was something about him that made the noise of the airport fade. The crying kids, the dragging suitcases, the metallic voice announcing another delay. All of it disappeared beneath the quiet gravity of his presence. "I don't even know your name," I said, my voice softer than I wanted it to be. He smiled, not wide, not polite, just enough to make my chest tighten. "You will," he said, "if you say yes." It sounded ridiculous, irresponsible, dangerous. But there was something dangerous about staying too. My flight, my so-called escape, was nowhere near boarding. And here was this man, offering another kind of exit, one that looked like a bad idea wrapped in temptation, one that felt like a story I wasn't supposed to live. I hesitated, of course. I asked him what any sane person would ask. "Why me?" He shrugged. "Maybe I like lost things." I almost laughed. Almost. But the way he said it, low and deliberate, made it sound like truth. "Come with me," he said again. "My jet leaves in 20 minutes. Rome. You'll make better memories than the ones you're running from." That hit harder than I expected. How did he know I was running from something? Maybe it was obvious. Maybe I carried the weight of heartbreak too loudly. Or maybe he was just the kind of man who could read pain the way others read a map. Every instinct in me screamed to walk away, but then he looked at me and I realized something strange. I wasn't afraid. Not of him. Not of what might happen next. I don't remember saying yes. Maybe I didn't. Maybe the word never left my lips. But somehow I was walking beside him through the quiet corridors of the terminal, my suitcase rolling behind me, my heart pounding like it knew it had just crossed a line. The air outside smelled like rain and jet fuel. A black car waited near the private hangars. He opened the door for me, old-fashioned, polite, powerful. The kind of gesture that made you forget it came from a man who probably broke laws for breakfast. As we drove toward the private jet, the city lights blurred behind the rain-streaked windows. I should have asked more questions. Who he really was, why he noticed me, why I felt safer beside him than I ever had with people who claimed to love me. But I didn't ask. Because deep down, I already knew. Some questions don't need answers when the story has already decided where it wants to take you. The car stopped in front of a sleek, silver jet that looked like it belonged in a movie. The kind of plane reserved for men who didn't wait in lines, didn't follow rules, and didn't explain themselves. Rain slicked the runway, and the world shimmered under the lights. He stepped out first, his movements smooth, effortless. The driver took my bag, but my hand still trembled around the handle as I followed him. The air was cold and sharp, smelling faintly of fuel and thunder. Every step I took felt like stepping further away from the life I knew, and deeper into something I couldn't name. Inside, the jet was quiet. Too quiet. Cream leather seats, polished wood, dim golden light. It felt more like a secret than a plane. He motioned for me to sit, and when I did, he poured 2 glasses of champagne without asking if I wanted one. To new destinations, he said simply. I hesitated before clinking my glass against his. The bubbles touched my lips like electricity, and I realized my heart hadn't stopped racing since the airport. He studied me as I looked out the small oval window, watching raindrops chase each other down the glass. The engines hummed, and before I could second-guess myself, the jet began to move. I wasn't supposed to be there. Every instinct reminded me of that, but something in me, the part that was tired of surviving instead of living, whispered that maybe I was exactly where I needed to be. He finally broke the silence. You haven't asked where we're going. I looked at him, trying to read the mystery in his calm expression. You said Rome, he smiled slightly. I did, but I didn't say why. There was weight in his words, not like he was testing me, waiting to see how far I'd follow curiosity before it turned into fear. I don't think I need to know, I said quietly. That seemed to surprise him. Maybe most people wanted answers. Maybe I was different, because I'd already lost enough to stop demanding them. He leaned back, swirling the champagne in his glass, eyes half-shadowed by the dim cabin light. Most people are afraid of me, he said. You're not. I didn't know what to say. Because it wasn't bravery, it was exhaustion. When you've already been hurt enough, fear starts to lose its meaning. I don't think you scare me, I said. Not yet, anyway. He laughed softly. That's because you don't know who I am. And then, without looking at me, he added, Dante Moretti. The name hit like a slow echo. Familiar, dangerous, infamous. I'd heard it before, whispered in news stories and rumors. The Moretti family. The kind of name that made people disappear. For a moment, everything inside me went still. He turned his gaze toward me again. Calm, unreadable. Still not afraid? I wanted to lie, but the truth was softer, deeper. No, I said, just awake. The hum of the engines was steady, almost hypnotic, like the heartbeat of the night itself. I sat across from him, pretending to focus on the faint glow of the city fading below us, but my thoughts refused to stay still. Dante Moretti. The name rolled through my head like thunder, deep, dangerous, and impossible to ignore. I'd heard that name before. Everyone had. You didn't have to belong to his world to know what it meant. Power, money, secrets, and rumors of things better left unspoken. Yet sitting there, I couldn't connect that shadowed reputation with the man across from me, the one quietly tracing the rim of his glass, his gaze calm, his voice softer than I ever expected from someone with a name that carried weight and fear. He noticed me watching. You've gone quiet, he said. I'm trying to decide if this is real, I answered. He tilted his head slightly. You mean me? I smiled faintly. All of this. You, the jet. The fact that I'm sitting here when I was supposed to be boarding a flight full of crying babies in business suits. His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. Maybe real isn't what you think it is. Maybe it's the moments that don't make sense that end up being the most honest. I didn't know if that was charm or truth, but either way, it made something in me loosen. He leaned back, watching me in that quiet, observant way that made every breath feel like a confession. You don't belong in places like that airport, he said. You looked like you were trying to disappear. He wasn't wrong. I had been trying to vanish, quietly, without a trace. And what makes you think you know where I belong? I asked. His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. Because I've spent most of my life watching people pretend. You weren't pretending, you were escaping. I wanted to deny it. But his words had a way of finding truth in places I thought I'd buried. Maybe I was, I whispered. And maybe you're the kind of man I should be running from. He didn't look offended. In fact, he almost looked amused. Maybe, he said softly. But you're still here. The way he said it, low, unhurried, certain, felt like a promise and a warning wrapped in one. Outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds thinned, revealing a pale moon that followed us through the dark sky. I pressed my palm to the window, feeling the vibration of the engines beneath my skin, and wondered if fate really was just a series of small, reckless choices. I didn't know what waited in Rome. I didn't know what kind of man Dante Moretti really was. All I knew was that something had shifted. Not outside, but inside me. Maybe it was the danger. Maybe it was the quiet. Or maybe it was the way he looked at me. Not like a stranger. Not like prey. But like someone who, for the first time in a long time, finally saw me. Hours passed, though time had started to lose shape somewhere above the clouds. The cabin lights dimmed to a warm, golden haze, soft enough to make everything feel unreal. I could hear the faint hum of the engines, the clinking of ice in a glass, and the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat trying to keep up with the silence between us. Dante hadn't spoken in a while. He sat opposite me, half in shadow, his gaze on the window, but his attention, I could feel it, still tethered to me. I wondered what he was thinking. About business, about me, about why he'd asked a stranger to step into his world without warning or reason. Finally, I broke the silence. Why did you ask me to come with you? He looked at me then, really looked, like he was deciding how much truth I could handle. Because you didn't ask for anything, he said. Everyone I meet wants something, money, access, a name. You just wanted to leave. His voice carried no arrogance, just fact. It was strange, hearing that kind of honesty from a man like him, the kind who was used to control, who probably never needed to explain himself. You don't even know me, I said quietly. He smiled faintly, almost tired. You'd be surprised how much you can learn about a person without words. The way they sit, the way they look at doors, the way they hold their breath before they lie. I didn't know whether to feel flattered or exposed. So what did you learn about me? He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, eyes locked on mine. That you were never planning to go where your ticket said. You were running. Not toward something, but away. The words landed like a whisper against an open wound. He was right. I had been running, but I wasn't sure from what anymore. Heartbreak, loneliness, or myself. I took a slow breath. You sound like someone who's done a lot of running too. His expression changed. Not anger, not surprise, but something more complicated. Maybe I still am, he said. But I don't run from things. I collect them, and I decide what's worth keeping. There it was, that quiet danger beneath every word he spoke. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. Because somehow between all the things he said and didn't say, I understood that his danger wasn't about violence. It was about closeness. He was the kind of man who got too near, too quickly, and left nothing untouched once he did. For a while, we just sat there, strangers suspended between clouds, pretending this was normal. Then he said something so soft I almost missed it. You remind me of someone I used to trust. There was no follow-up, no explanation. Just that. A confession disguised as a memory. And I realized maybe for both of us, this flight wasn't about where we were going. It was about what we were trying to forget. Morning found us somewhere above the Atlantic, the light spilling into the cabin like a quiet apology for everything the night couldn't say. I hadn't slept much. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want to. There was something about the silence between us that felt alive, like the air itself was holding its breath. Dante sat by the window, the sunrise catching the edge of his jaw, turning him into something carved out of gold and shadow. He wasn't wearing the suit jacket anymore, just a black shirt with the top buttons undone, sleeves rolled, the kind of effortless disarray that made power look human. He turned slightly, catching me watching him. "You don't trust easily, do you?" I blinked, unsure if it was a question or a statement. "I trust when I have a reason to." He gave a soft laugh, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes but lingers somewhere in the throat. "And what if I told you I could give you one?" I should have looked away. I didn't. Instead, I said, "You don't strike me as the type who does anything without expecting something back." That made him smile. Really smile this time. "You're not wrong. But maybe this isn't about what I want." The words hung between us, weightless and heavy all at once. He stood, walked past me, and poured 2 cups of coffee. When he handed me one, our fingers brushed, a small, harmless touch that somehow felt anything but. "Do you always run from the truth?" he asked. I looked at him over the rim of the cup. Only when it's staring back at me. He leaned against the counter, studying me like I was a puzzle he wasn't sure he wanted to solve. "You're not like them," he said quietly. "The women who try to be close to me. You don't look for control. You look for peace. That's rare." For a second I almost forgot to breathe, because beneath his calm voice I could hear something raw, a kind of loneliness that matched my own. "Maybe peace is overrated," I whispered. He stepped closer. Not touching, but close enough that I could feel the heat of his presence. "No," he said, his voice low. "It's just expensive." And just like that, the air changed. I could feel it. The gravity between us shifting, thickening, pulling. It wasn't lust, not yet. It was something quieter, more dangerous. He looked at me for a long time, then turned away, breaking whatever invisible thread had started to tie us together. "Get some rest," he said. "We'll land in 2 hours." But I didn't sleep. Because I knew something had begun, something neither of us planned for, not romance. Not yet. Just the slow unraveling of 2 people who weren't supposed to understand each other. But somehow did. The wheels touched the runway with a quiet thud that felt more like a warning than an arrival. When I opened my eyes, the world outside had changed. No longer the gray skies of New York, but the sun-drenched hills of southern Italy, glowing gold under the morning light. For a moment it didn't feel real. The vineyards stretched endlessly, the air shimmered like a dream, and in the distance, the sea caught fire beneath the sun. And somewhere between that beauty, a quiet unease began to bloom. Dante was already up, jacket back on, mask of calm in place. Whatever warmth the night had allowed him, it was gone now. He was the man from the airport again. Precise, unreadable, powerful. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice still rough with sleep. "Private airfield outside Amalfi," he said simply. "My family's estate isn't far. My family's estate." The way he said it, so casual, so heavy, made something tighten in my chest. When we stepped outside, the air smelled of citrus and salt. A line of black cars waited, engines already running. Men in dark suits stood beside them, quiet, watchful, disciplined. The kind of silence that spoke louder than words. One of them nodded to Dante. "Benvenuto, Signor Moretti." Moretti. The name hit me like ice water. I had heard it before, in headlines, in whispers, in stories that always ended badly. The Moretti family wasn't just powerful. They were untouchable. Old money, old blood, and if rumors were true, their empire was built on more than vineyards and charm. Dante caught the flicker of recognition in my face. His lips curved, not quite a smile. Now you understand. I swallowed hard. You're... that Moretti. He tilted his head, studying me. Does that change something? Everything I wanted to say, but the words didn't come. He stepped closer, voice softer now. You didn't ask who I was when I offered you a seat. Don't start asking now. For a moment, I couldn't tell if it was a warning or protection. The driver opened the door. I hesitated. Dante turned to me, his gaze steady. You can still walk away, but could I? Somewhere between the airport delay and the clouds above the ocean, something had shifted. I wasn't sure if it was curiosity, danger, or something far more reckless. I stepped into the car. The door closed behind me with a final, echoing sound, like the beginning of something I couldn't undo. As we drove through winding coastal roads, I watched the sea blur past and realized the truth. I wasn't running anymore. I was falling into a world built on secrets and silk, power and danger. And at the center of it all sat Dante Moretti, the man whose silence could both terrify and calm me. The car wound through a long road lined with cypress trees, the air thick with the scent of lemons and something darker, like history that refused to stay buried. When the gates opened, I saw it, the Moretti estate. It wasn't just a house. It was a statement. Marble columns, ivy crawling across stone walls, fountains that sang to no one. Every corner whispered power, the kind that didn't need to raise its voice. Dante stepped out first, the guard straightening at his presence. I followed, my heels sinking slightly into the gravel. Somewhere deep inside, a voice told me to turn around. But curiosity, that beautiful, dangerous thing, was stronger. Inside, the air was cool and perfumed. Paintings lined the walls, saints and sinners, battles and betrayals. And in the middle of it all, a massive portrait of an older man with Dante's same sharp jaw and colder eyes. Your father? I asked softly. He paused beside me. The late Giovanni Moretti. He built this place, and everything that came with it. There was no pride in his tone, only weight. We walked through halls that felt too quiet, too careful. I caught fragments of whispers from the staff, a woman in the kitchen crossing herself when Dante passed, a guard who looked at me as if I didn't belong here. Maybe I didn't. Why bring me here? I asked finally. He looked over his shoulder. Because once in a while I like to see what honesty looks like before it disappears. The answer didn't make sense. Or maybe it did, in a way that scared me. He led me out to a balcony overlooking the cliffs. The sea stretched below, endless and merciless. Everything you see, he said, his voice calm, comes with a price. Loyalty, silence, sometimes blood. I turned to him. And love? He met my gaze unflinching. That's the most expensive of all. For a second, neither of us breathed. The breeze tangled my hair, and the distance between us felt thinner than it should have been. Then a voice called from inside. Signor Moretti, the shipment arrived. Just like that, the moment broke. The mask slipped back over his face, composed, commanding, untouchable. Stay here, he said. Don't talk to anyone. Don't wander. And he was gone. I stood there, staring at the horizon, the waves crashing far below. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd stepped into a story that didn't have an ending. Somewhere inside that beautiful prison of glass and marble, a truth was waiting, about who Dante really was, and what he might cost me. He told me not to wander, but some words sound less like warnings and more like invitations. The moment Dante disappeared down the hall, curiosity began its slow, traitorous rise. The estate was too still, too quiet. It felt less like a home and more like a stage, every step echoing with secrets that refused to die. I followed the sound of voices, soft at first, then sharper. Words in Italian, low and commanding. I couldn't understand every phrase, but I understood tone, control, tension, power. It led me to a door slightly ajar. I hesitated, then leaned closer. Inside, Dante stood by a long wooden table. Around him, 4 men in suits, older, heavier, with faces carved from suspicion. Papers spread before them, and between them sat a small black case. Dante's voice was calm, but his eyes were something else, sharp, cold, the kind that didn't ask twice. "Tell me again," he said, in perfect English, "why the payment didn't arrive." One of the men stammered something about delay, about border checks. Dante didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His silence did all the work. When he finally spoke, it was almost gentle. "Fix it, or someone else will." A pause. Then he turned, and for a heartbeat, his eyes landed on the doorway. On me, I froze. The air left my lungs. He didn't say a word, just held my gaze long enough to make it clear. I wasn't supposed to be there. Then, just as quietly, he dismissed the others. They filed out without a glance in my direction, the door closing behind them with a soft click. He didn't speak immediately. He just looked at me, hands in his pockets, every inch the man people feared. "I told you not to wander," he said finally. "I wasn't—" I started, then stopped. Lying felt pointless. He stepped closer, slow and deliberate. "You saw something you weren't meant to. Do you understand what that means?" My throat tightened. Should I be scared? He tilted his head, studying me like a storm studies the shore before breaking it. "You should be careful." There was no threat in his tone. Just truth. And that was worse. He brushed past me, opening the door. "Come with me." I followed him through another corridor, down a set of marble stairs that led to a garden overlooking the sea. The air was cooler here, salt and jasmine mixing in the wind. Dante stopped, his back to me. "Whatever you think you saw," he said, "you didn't. And if I did?" I asked softly. He turned, eyes darker now. "Then you'll have to decide whether you're safer pretending or knowing." For the first time, I realized something terrifying. I didn't know if he was protecting me from his world or pulling me deeper into it. That night, the estate didn't sleep. Or maybe it was just me who couldn't. The house felt alive, breathing through the creak of floorboards, the whisper of wind brushing against glass. Somewhere below, footsteps moved in rhythm, guards shifting, men speaking in hushed Italian. It wasn't peace. It was control, measured, calculated, suffocating. And yet, in the middle of all that power, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Dante Moretti. The man who looked at me like a secret and spoke like a promise he never intended to keep. I found him outside on the terrace, alone, a glass of whiskey in his hand, and the night pressing close around him. The moonlight touched his face, and for once, he didn't look untouchable. He looked tired. I stepped closer. "You don't sleep much, do you?" He didn't turn. "Sleep's for men who don't have ghosts. Do you?" He gave a soft laugh. "More than I can count." Silence settled between us, gentle but heavy. The kind of silence that only exists between two people who have both run too far to go back. Finally, I said, "You scared me today." He nodded, still not looking at me. "Good." "That's not funny," I said quietly. It wasn't meant to be. Something in his tone made me shiver, not from fear, but from the strange, quiet ache underneath. "I didn't mean to see anything," I whispered. "I know." "Then why do you look like you're waiting for me to disappear?" That made him turn. His eyes caught the moonlight, softer now, sadder. "Because people don't stay when they find out what I am." He set the glass down, stepped toward me slowly, every movement deliberate, careful. "You saw a part of me today that isn't meant for strangers, the kind of part that destroys whatever it touches." I shook my head. "You don't get to decide what destroys me." He stopped right in front of me, close enough that I could feel his breath, smell the faint trace of smoke and whiskey on his skin. "You don't know what you're saying," he murmured. "Then tell me," I said. "Tell me what I don't know." For a moment he just looked at me. And then, like the last thread of control snapping, his hand came up, fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face, lingering against my cheek. His voice was low, almost broken. "My family doesn't forgive weakness, and the moment they think I've found one..." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. I could feel the weight of what he wasn't saying. That loving him wasn't dangerous because of who he was, but because of who watched him. The air between us trembled. And when he finally whispered, "You should have never stepped onto that plane," I knew he meant it, but it was too late. Because somewhere between fear and fascination, I already had. Morning crept slowly through the curtains, soft light spilling over the marble floors like the world itself was trying to make amends for the night before. I hadn't slept. Not after what he said, not after the look in his eyes when he told me I should have never stepped onto that plane. I found him in the garden again. He was sitting alone this time, without the glass, without the armor. Just a man in a dark shirt, staring out at the endless horizon. For the first time, he didn't look like Dante Moretti, the heir, the legend, the whispered name. He just looked human. I didn't say his name. I just sat beside him, the silence between us fragile but honest. The morning air carried the scent of roses and salt. It almost felt peaceful, if peace could exist in a place like this. After a while, he spoke. "You ever wonder what it's like to be born into something you never chose?" I turned to him. "All the time," he smiled faintly. "My father used to say the Moretti blood doesn't run, it commands. That we don't ask, we take. And if we bleed, we make sure someone else bleeds more." There was no pride in his voice, only fatigue. "He died when I was 20, Dante continued. "I buried him and inherited a kingdom built on silence and sin. People talk about power like it's freedom. It isn't. It's a cage with golden walls." I looked at him carefully. "And you stay because—" He met my gaze, eyes dark but unguarded. "Because leaving would mean someone else takes my place. And they'd be worse." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. What could you possibly say to a man who carried the weight of an empire and the guilt of keeping it standing? So I didn't say anything. I just reached for the rose petal that had fallen onto the table between us, twirling it between my fingers. "You talk like someone who wants redemption." He laughed softly. "Redemption doesn't exist for men like me. Only reputation, but you still want it." He looked at me for a long time before answering. "Maybe I want to remember what wanting felt like." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves. For a heartbeat, it was like the world forgot who we were. Then he said something I didn't expect. "There's a chapel on the hill behind this house. My mother used to go there every Sunday. It's quiet now. No one's been inside since she died." I waited. "Come with me," he said softly. "It's the only place here that still feels clean." And in that moment, I saw it. The man he buried beneath the name, the heir, the power, the boy who once believed in something pure before the world taught him how to hide it. And for the first time I realized I wasn't just drawn to him. I was starting to understand him. The chapel sat on the edge of the cliffs, half hidden by ivy and thyme. From the outside, it looked forgotten, the kind of place even the sea had learned to whisper around instead of through. We walked there in silence. The path was narrow, the air heavy with the scent of rosemary and stone. Dante led the way, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense like he was walking toward something he wasn't ready to face. When we reached the old wooden doors, he paused, just for a moment, before pushing them open. Inside, the air was cool and still. Dust floated in golden light spilling through stained glass. Candles sat unlit on the altar. Wax melted into strange frozen tears. It felt sacred, not because of faith, but because of memory. Dante didn't speak at first. He just walked down the aisle and stopped near the front pew. I followed, each step echoing like a heartbeat. He traced his fingers over the back of the bench, where initials had been carved long ago. DM and LM, I read softly. "My mother," he said. "Lucia Moretti. She used to bring me here when I was a kid. She said it was the only place where the world couldn't hear us." I looked around. "It still feels that way," he nodded. "After she died, I stopped coming. My father said prayer was for the weak, but she believed in forgiveness." His voice cracked, barely audible. It was the first time I'd heard it. A break in the armor. I stepped closer. "Did she forgive you?" He smiled sadly. "She never got the chance." Silence. only the sound of the wind outside, brushing against glass like a ghost trying to come home. Without thinking, I reached for his hand. His fingers were cold, tense, until they weren't. He didn't pull away. "Everyone thinks they know what kind of man I am," he said quietly, "but no one ever asks what kind of man I wanted to be." I looked at him. "Then tell me." His eyes met mine, steady, dark, unguarded. Free. That one word hung in the air, soft as a prayer. Something shifted. The space between us stopped being space. It became gravity. He reached up slowly, brushing his thumb against my jaw, his breath close enough to taste. But he didn't kiss me. Instead, he whispered, "You should leave before I forget what good feels like." My heart ached at the gentleness in his voice, because it wasn't rejection. It was protection, and somehow that hurt more. When he turned away, I let him. But as I stood there, staring at the stained glass bleeding light across the floor, I knew one thing for certain. It wasn't faith I'd found in that chapel. It was him, and that was just as dangerous. By the time we left the chapel, the sky had turned the color of bruised violets. The sun was sinking behind the cliffs, and the sea below was restless, waves crashing harder than before, like even the water sensed what was coming. We walked in silence. The air had changed. It felt heavier, charged. Halfway down the path, Dante stopped. His head turned slightly, like he'd heard something I hadn't. Then I saw it too. A black SUV parked just beyond the gates of the estate. It wasn't one of his. The shift in his posture was instant, calm but dangerous, the kind of stillness that happens right before lightning strikes. "Stay behind me," he said. My pulse quickened. "Who is it?" He didn't answer. His hand moved beneath his jacket, not for a gesture but for a weapon. The glint of metal caught what little light was left. 2 men stepped out of the SUV. Dark suits. No insignia. One of them said something in Italian I couldn't catch, but whatever it wasn't friendly. Dante replied, his voice low, sharp. The kind of tone that made you realize the man I'd met on the plane, the man who'd touched my face in a chapel, was the same man people feared for a reason. And then, just like that, the tension broke. A shout, a hand raised, the sound of something metallic clicking. Dante pushed me back so fast I barely had time to breathe before he fired once. Clean, precise. One of the men fell. The other froze. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Even the wind. Dante stepped forward, the gun steady in his grip. He said something else, quieter this time. The second man raised his hands and backed away. The SUV's engine roared and then it was gone, swallowed by the winding road. I stood there, my heart slamming against my ribs, the smell of gunpowder lingering in the air. He turned back to me, eyes darker than I'd ever seen. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head, but I couldn't find my voice. He looked at me, not as the man in the garden or the chapel, but as something else. Something older, heir, protector, hunter. Finally, I whispered, "Is this what your world looks like?" He holstered the weapon, his jaw tight. "No, this is what happens when you try to leave it." There was no apology in his tone, only truth and exhaustion. As we reached the house, I glanced back once more. The chapel stood against the dying light, quiet and still. It looked peaceful from a distance, but now I knew better. Peace, in Dante's world, was never real. It was only the silence before the next storm. The storm hit just after sunset. Rain drummed against the windows like 1,000 quiet warnings. The old house groaned under the wind, the sea below roaring in time with every heartbeat I tried to steady. Dante locked the last door, then turned off the main lights, leaving only the soft glow of one lamp between us. His shirt was streaked with rain, his hair damp, a single drop sliding down his jaw. He looked less like the heir to a Mafia empire, and more like a man stripped down to something real, someone fighting against ghosts. I tried to breathe, but the silence between the thunderclaps was heavy enough to crush air. He spoke first. "They'll come again. Not tonight, but soon." He wasn't asking for pity. He was stating a fact, like the tide or gravity. What happens then? I asked. He looked at me, eyes searching mine. Then we stop running. A flash of lightning lit the room, his silhouette sharp, carved by fear and resolve. For a second I saw what that promise meant. It wasn't just defiance. It was a vow he'd already decided to die for if he had to. The generator flickered once, then the lights went out completely. Darkness swallowed the room, except for the faint reflection of the storm outside. Without thinking, I reached for him. He caught my wrist before I could pull away, not roughly, just enough to steady me. "You're shaking." "So are you," I whispered. He laughed softly, but it wasn't amusement. Maybe for the first time in years. The storm outside cracked louder. The whole sky seemed to split open. He guided me to the fireplace and struck a match. For a moment, the flame trembled like us, small, defiant, alive. When the fire caught, the shadows softened. He sat across from me, elbows on his knees, staring into the light. The air smelled of smoke and rain. "Everything I touch," he said, almost to himself, "ends up bleeding." "Then don't touch the world," I said quietly. "Just stay here, for tonight." He looked up, and the way his gaze settled on me, steady, unguarded, was enough to still the storm inside my chest. We didn't move closer at first. We just sat there, two people learning how to exist in the same silence without fear. When he finally reached out, it wasn't hunger. It was hesitation. A hand brushing my cheek, a question in the shape of a touch. I didn't answer with words. Just a breath, a nod, and the small distance between us disappeared. Outside, thunder rolled across the cliffs. Inside, the fire crackled quietly, and time slowed until there was nothing left but warmth, breath, and the faint rhythm of two hearts trying to forget the world. The rest, whatever it might have been, stayed between the storm and the silence. Morning came slow, gray, and too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't belong after a storm. The fire had burned down to ashes, and the world outside the windows was washed clean, but not safe. I woke before Dante did. His jacket was draped over me, still carrying the scent of rain and cedar. For a minute, I just watched him sleep. The hard lines on his face had softened, but not completely. Even in rest, he looked like a man ready to fight ghosts. When he stirred, his hand went automatically to the gun on the table beside him. Reflex before reason. Then his eyes found me, and the tension melted just enough. "You didn't sleep," he said, voice rough. "I did," I lied. For a while, he didn't call me out on it. He just stood, looked toward the window and frowned. A car engine in the distance. Faint, steady, getting closer. The world snapped back into motion. He crossed to the window, pulled the curtain an inch to the side. "They found us." 3 words, flat, certain. My stomach dropped. "Already?" He turned to me, calm, too calm. "Get your things. We leave now." I moved fast, the adrenaline hitting like a cold wave. My fingers shook as I zipped the bag, and the thought hit me. I didn't even know where we were going. "Dante, where?" He cut me off gently. Somewhere they won't expect. Somewhere no one has my name. There was something about the way he said it. Not like a plan, but a plea. Like part of him still hoped for a version of his life where he could just disappear. Outside, tires crunched over gravel. The hum grew louder. Dante grabbed my wrist. Not rough, just sure. "Stay low." We slipped out the back, down the narrow path behind the house. The ground was slick with rain, the air sharp with pine and salt. The cliffs loomed ahead, endless blue-gray sea beneath them. For a moment, the world held its breath. A voice shouted behind us. Then another. The crack of a gun echoed off the rocks. Dante pulled me down behind an old stone wall, the sea spraying cold mist over us. "They won't shoot to kill," he murmured. "Not yet, not yet," I whispered, terrified. He looked at me, that strange mix of certainty and sorrow. "They need me alive, you—" "Maybe not." Before I could answer, he leaned in, not to kiss me, but close enough for me to hear him over the wind. "If anything happens to me, you run toward the cliffs. There's a boat below the cove. My voice cracked. I'm not leaving you, his eyes softened. You already did once. Don't make me watch it again. And just like that, he stood, gun drawn, face hard as stone, and stepped into the open. The world exhaled all at once. The sea roared. The fight had finally found us. The wind hit like a warning. Cold, fierce, alive. It carried the smell of the sea, and the sound of men moving through the trees behind us. Dante stood at the cliff's edge, the storm's leftover mist wrapping around him like smoke. I could hear the distant click of safeties being released, the faint hum of engines idling somewhere unseen. He knew they had him cornered. But the thing about men like Dante Moretti, they never believed in corners. Only exits. Stay behind the wall, he said, voice even, no matter what happens. I wanted to protest, to tell him I wasn't leaving, but something in his eyes silenced me. It wasn't fear, it was farewell. Then the shouts came. A rush of footsteps. Commands in a language I couldn't fully understand, but I didn't need to. The tone was enough. Dante stepped forward, hands slightly raised. You don't want to do this, he called out. Walk away while you still can. The reply was a burst of sound, tires skidding, boots hitting gravel. And then the storm that had slept all night returned, not from the sky, but from the hearts of men. He moved first, fast, decisive. Not reckless, every motion measured, like a man writing his own ending with precision. I ducked behind the stone wall, heart pounding so hard I could taste it. The world shrank to noise, wind, shouts, the echo of conflict carried by the cliffs. For a moment, silence. Then his voice again, closer this time. Go! I looked up. He was already moving toward me, jacket torn, face pale but steady. They won't stop, he said. We have one chance, the boat. We ran. The path was slick, the rocks jagged beneath our shoes. Every step felt like a gamble against time. Behind us, the chaos blurred into distance, swallowed by sea spray and echo. At the last bend, he stopped. Grabbed my arm. You can't look back, he said. Promise me. I wanted to ask why, but the words wouldn't come. So I nodded. He let go, only to take my hand instead. And in that one small touch, there was every apology he'd never said, and every truth he couldn't afford to tell. The cliff narrowed ahead. Below, the cove waited, a small boat rocking in restless water, tied loosely to a rusted post. Almost there, he breathed. But fate rarely lets men like him walk away clean. A shout rang out from above, followed by the whir of a drone circling overhead. Dante looked up, jaw tight, then back at me. Get in the boat, I hesitated. And you? He smiled. That same quiet, infuriating smile that first unraveled me on an airport floor. I'll be right behind you. I wanted to believe him. I did. But something in the way he said it told me the world was about to change forever. The first wave hit like a slap. Salt, wind, and chaos all at once. I stumbled into the boat, breath ragged, fingers fumbling with the rope that held us to the dock. Behind me, Dante was still on the rocks, the sky around him flashing with distant light. Go, he shouted over the wind. I'm not leaving without you. He started down the slope, half running, half sliding, the tide spraying up around his boots. The boat jerked as another wave crashed against it. I clung to the edge, the rope slick in my hands. Then I saw them. Dark figures above on the cliff line, moving fast. Too fast. Dante saw them too. His head snapped up, eyes narrowing, calculating distance, time, risk. He didn't have any of those left. For a heartbeat, everything slowed. The roar of the water faded. All I could hear was my own pulse and his voice in my head saying, "Don't look back." He reached me, one hand gripping the side of the boat. "Get it started!" I yanked the cord, once, twice. The small engine sputtered, coughed, caught. The sound was a lifeline. "Now!" he ordered. I grabbed his arm to pull him in, but he didn't move. He was watching the ridge above us, where the men were closing in. "Dante," he turned then, eyes softer than they should have been for a man staring down fate. "There's no time." The words hit harder than the wind. "Don't you dare!" He smiled, faint, tired, almost tender. "You once asked what my world looks like." He leaned closer, his voice barely louder than the sea. "This is it, doing one right thing before it ends." And before I could answer, he pushed the boat away with all his strength. The motion threw me backward. The engine screamed to life, the distance widening fast. I reached out, screaming his name, but the waves stole it, tore it apart before it reached him. He stayed there, on the rocks, a lone figure against a gray horizon, one hand raised, as if to hold the storm back himself. Then the mist swallowed him. The boat spun out toward open water. I tried to steer, but tears blurred everything. The sea, the cliffs, the world I thought we might have had. Somewhere behind me, I thought I heard a final echo. One last sound swallowed by the wind. Or maybe it was just my heart breaking loud enough to trick me into believing he'd called my name. The sea didn't care. It took what it wanted. Everything else it left behind was silence. And that's how the story of a delay at an airport ended. Not with arrival, not with goodbye, but with the promise that love, once found, never really lands anywhere safe. The sea carried me through the night. By the time the boat drifted into a quiet inlet, dawn had already broken open across the horizon, pale gold over gray water. The world looked washed out, emptied. So was I. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring at the line where sky met sea, waiting for the impossible. That he'd appear through the mist, soaked, smiling, saying he told me not to look back. He never did. When I finally stepped onto the sand, my legs gave out. Every muscle in me trembled from cold, fear, and the kind of sorrow that doesn't scream. It just sits inside you, heavy and endless. Waves lapped at my knees, gentle now, like an apology for what they'd taken. I made it to a small fishing village beyond the dunes. The people there didn't ask questions. Maybe they'd seen too many lost faces wash up with the tide. A woman wrapped me in a blanket, pressed warm bread into my hands, and pointed me toward a small inn at the edge of the road. For 2 days, I didn't speak. The world went on. Markets opened, bells rang, children laughed. But I was living in a pause between heartbeats. On the 3rd morning, I walked to the pier. The water was calm, too calm. I sat there, the blanket still around my shoulders, and whispered into the wind. "You said you'd be right behind me." And then, something caught the light. At first I thought it was just a trick of the sun on the waves. But no, it was metal, small, glinting. I stepped closer. A silver locket, tangled in seaweed near the rocks. My hands shook as I pulled it free. Inside, the chain was broken, but the engraving was clear. D and A, in the quiet, we survive. It was his. I remembered him wearing it the first night we met. The chain glinting against his collar when he smiled that careful, dangerous smile. My breath hitched. If the sea had swallowed him whole, how did this make it back? And why was there no blood, no body, no final proof? A cold certainty slid through me. Not dread, not relief. Just knowing. Men like Dante didn't vanish. They rewrote their exits. Behind me, the village bell rang noon. The sound carried over the water, steady, echoing. I closed my eyes and let it ring. For the first time since that night, I didn't cry. I just listened. To the sea, to the wind, to the whisper inside me that said, "This isn't over." Because maybe love doesn't end. Maybe it hides, the way he once told me time hides truth. Waiting for the moment it can return without getting shot down. And somewhere beyond the horizon, I swore I could hear another engine start. Faint, familiar, alive. A's became weeks. The village began to fade into routine, fishermen hauling their nets, church bells marking hours I no longer counted. But inside me, something refused to settle. It was the sound. Every night just before sleep, I'd hear it again. The low hum of an engine that shouldn't exist anymore. I told myself it was imagination. That my mind, desperate for ghosts, was building one out of waves. And yet, every time the tide turned, it came back. A rhythm too steady, too human, too his. I started walking the coastline at dawn. Locals thought I was just another traveler nursing a heartbreak. They didn't know I was listening. One morning, an old fisherman stopped me. His face was all sun and years. "You lost someone to the sea," he said, not as a question. I nodded. He squinted toward the horizon. "Then you'll want to talk to the harbor guard. A man came through 2 nights ago. Said his boat was wrecked. Didn't give a name. Left before sunrise." My breath caught. Did he say where he was going?" The old man shrugged. "North, maybe. Toward the border towns. North. That was where the Moretti syndicate had ties. The safe houses. The ports no one talked about. By the time he turned back to his nets, I was already running. Back at the inn, I gathered what little I had. Money, passport, the locket now strung on a thin thread around my neck. It felt heavier than it should have, like it was leading me somewhere. The train station sat beyond the cliffs, overlooking the sea. I bought a ticket without knowing the destination printed on it. The woman behind the counter asked if I was traveling alone. I was, I said. Maybe not anymore. The journey north wound through rain and fog. Outside the window, the world blurred. Villages, forests, rivers, each one looking more like a memory than a place. I kept my hand over the locket. It was warm against my skin, as if the metal still remembered the pulse that once wore it. By dusk, the train slowed near an industrial port. Cargo ships loomed like sleeping beasts, their lights blinking through mist. That's when I saw it, painted faintly on the side of a warehouse. A symbol, half worn but unmistakable. The same emblem that was on the ring Dante used to twist when he was thinking. My chest tightened. He'd been here. I stepped off the train, the wind catching the hem of my coat. The air smelled like fuel and salt, his world's scent. Somewhere in the maze of ships and steel, I heard it again. The hum. Low, steady, defiant. And for the first time since the cliff, I smiled, because the sound wasn't a memory. It was a message. And if he was still out there, then so was the story we hadn't finished. The docks were almost empty by the time I found the hangar. Rust peeled from its doors, and every sound, a gull's cry, the crash of waves, echoed like memory. There was a man standing near the edge of the pier, coat whipping in the wind, his posture too familiar to mistake. For a long time, I didn't move. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 ways. Him alive, him broken, him gone again before I reached him. But nothing prepared me for the truth of it. He turned and the world just stopped. It was Dante. Alive. Changed, but alive. His hair was longer, a small scar cutting through his left brow, a reminder of what the sea had tried to take. When he spoke, his voice carried the exhaustion of someone who'd crossed more than oceans. "You shouldn't have come." I laughed, but it broke halfway through. "You shouldn't have left." We stood there, 2 ghosts trying to remember how to be human. He stepped closer, every movement hesitant, like he was afraid I'd vanish if he reached too fast. "I had to make them believe I was dead," he said quietly. "It's the only way to end it. To end them." I stared at him, tears fighting to stay where they were. "All this time I thought the sea took you." It almost did. His gaze softened. "But then I remembered. You still believed I could be something more than a name people feared. I couldn't let that die." He reached into his coat and pulled out something small. The other half of the broken locket. The chain glinted in the fading light. He placed it in my palm, his fingers brushing mine. The sea gives back what it can't keep. For a long time we didn't speak. The world around us faded to nothing but breath and wind, and the quiet thrum of a new beginning trying to form. Finally, he whispered, "If you stay, you'll never be safe." Not truly. I looked at him, heart steady for the first time in months. "Safety's overrated," he smiled, small, tired, but real. The kind of smile that only belongs to men who've lost everything and still choose to stand. Behind us, engines stirred. A private jet idling on the runway beyond the port. The same kind of sound that had once started everything. He glanced toward it, then back at me. "One flight, no past, no names." I took his hand. "And no turning back?" "Never again," he said. As we walked toward the plane, the last light of the day bled gold across the water. The air smelled of salt and jet fuel. danger and promise woven together one last time. And in that moment, I realized something. Love doesn't always heal you. Sometimes it remakes you into someone brave enough to start over. When the wheels left the ground, the coastline disappeared beneath us. The world below was small, quiet, almost peaceful. I closed my eyes and let the hum of the engine carry me forward. The same sound that once meant loss, now meaning freedom. Because in the end, it wasn't an airport delay that changed everything. It was the choice to stay and to keep believing, even when the sky was falling. They say the sea forgets everything, but maybe that's only half true. Because a year later, when the waves roll against the Amalfi cliffs, sometimes I still hear the echo of an engine in the distance, steady, defiant, alive. We built a life far from names and news. A small villa overlooking the water, hidden behind olive trees and wildflowers that grow no matter what the world takes. He works the land now, his hands no longer holding power, only soil, roots, and the rhythm of quiet mornings. Sometimes he hums while he works. The same low tone that once terrified men now only keeps the birds curious. And me? I write again. Not stories of loss or crime or survival, but of beginnings. Of how light looks when it returns after too long in the dark. People read them, never knowing they're reading us. We never talk about the night the world ended and started over on the same breath. We don't need to. It lives between us, in the way he brushes salt from my hair, in the way I still check the horizon before I sleep. Because somewhere out there, the past still drifts. But it doesn't own us anymore. Some loves are born in peace. Ours was born in fire, and somehow survived long enough to find quiet. So when the wind moves across the sea and the gulls scatter into light, I whisper the same words carved into that old locket. In the quiet, we survive. And this time, we really do. If this story touched your heart, if you believe love can survive even the storm, then don't forget to subscribe. Because every story here reminds us that even in darkness, some hearts still find their way home. This is BRD Stories Hub, where every heartbeat tells a new story.